Tape 2 of Lost Records was just released, and upon completion, I thought it would be a fun idea to share my thoughts on the game and compare it to Life is Strange's Double Exposure. I was debating on comparing Lost Records with Dontnod's original Life is Strange game, but I thought it would be more fair comparing it to Deck 9's recent release with Double Exposure. Please note that I am in no way dissing either game here. I am simply just sharing my opinions and comparing these two games. With that being said, let's dive right in. Let's start off with graphics. Lost Records is the clear winner in this category with amazing attention to detail when it comes to character design and just visuals overall. And that's with everything from like clothing textures down to the freckles on Swan's face. Even the environment is breathtaking, especially with the lighting engine they used. The lighting really helped shape the ambience they were going for with this story. Now, don't get me wrong, Double Exposure was beautiful and actually the best looking Life is Strange game we have. However, when you compare it to Lost Records, it's like night and day. Now I want to talk about the stories. Personally, I did enjoy the story of Lost Records. Having a group of 14 girls having the best summer of their lives, only to be confronted with the reality of Kat's leukemia, while they also found this magical abyss, is a good story, and I also enjoyed how it took place in two timelines. It was kind of giving Yellow Jackets vibes, honestly, but it actually fell pretty flat for me. Everything I assumed that would happen, from Kat being the sort of spokesperson for the Abyss and also Corey being thrown into the Abyss, did end up happening. There were no plot twists or anything really shocking to happen throughout the game. I mean, except for finding out about Kat's leukemia, which is obviously very serious, and this isn't me trying to downplay leukemia, because clearly it's a very tragic thing to happen. But from a game perspective, and comparing it to Life is Strange's chaos, it missed the mark shock factor wise. There weren't any moments where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened, you know? And Double Exposure, on the other hand, it had so many plot twists. You know, you remember at the first, you were thinking it might have been Lucas to kill Sophie. Then we find out it was Max who killed her, but Max from an alternate timeline. And she did it because Sophie actually had powers as well, but was using them for evil. Both games had a lot of questions left up in the air for a sequel, which I'm not saying is a bad thing as long as we actually end up getting these sequels. But looking at these games individually without them, both endings were somewhat disappointing, only due to the fact that they were saving certain answers for the next game. This is where some people might disagree, but I think Lost Records and Double Exposure both had well-written stories. There's a lot of unnecessary hate for Double Exposure, but I found Double Exposure to be much more entertaining, story-wise, than Lost Records. Lost Records was a much more chill game, nothing too exciting going on, and again, very predictable. So with all that being said, Double Exposure wins in the story department. Let's go on to the characters themselves and how well they were written. Swan, Nora, Autumn, Kat, they were all extremely well-written characters, and thoroughly thought out, honestly. They each had very defined personalities. It felt like they were all real people and not just like copy and paste characters with the baseline personality. If you play your cards right, you can slightly see into Dylan's personality too if you comfort her and aren't against her throughout the game. Corey though, is the only character that really doesn't make sense. He's just an asshole to be an asshole? We don't know much backstory on why he is the way he is. It was, however, disappointing for him to be the main villain, if that's what you even want to call what he was. Not to defend him, but he really didn't do anything too crazy. He was just a bully, honestly. When we were running in the woods from him, I couldn't help but think, why are we so scared of this random man? To me, it felt very forced for him to be the villain, and going back to what I was saying earlier about there not being major plot twists in the game, I think most people near the beginning saw where they were going with his character, and that we would end up just pushing him into the abyss. The characters in Double Exposure were definitely an improvement from Deck 9's last entry, True Colors, I'll give them that. I felt that Moses, Vin, and Gwen, and even Amanda were all well written and distinctive characters, and I enjoyed my time with them. If you've seen my previous videos, you would know Max is one of my favorite characters of all time, so I'm not going to keep her into this comparison. But for the other characters, like Lucas, he was one that did not make much sense. His story arc seems to be that he was just a loser who couldn't even write his own book. We needed a lot more information there. Now, to Sophie, I really I really liked Safi for the first 3 chapters. But then she started turning evil. And for what exactly? Safi and Corey are both characters that I just do not understand their villain origin story at all. Safi felt so forced as a bad guy, and I'm definitely not alone in this. I think everybody also felt that she was very forced. It really just came out of nowhere that she wanted to run the world with Max and control everyone and everything, when nothing really happened to her. I mean, yeah, her friend unalived herself, which is unfortunate, and her book deal was taken from her due to her mom and co-workers, but like, world domination just from that? Make it make sense, honey. It doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. I know they were setting up for a sequel, but they could have done a lot better with her. So with all that being said, Lost Records had better written characters than Double Exposure, in my opinion. Yes, even though Max as a character is better than all of them combined, to me at least, it wouldn't be fair for me to say Double Exposure had better characters just because of one god tier, you know? The characters in Lost Records, they were just more fleshed out as a whole compared to the other main characters in Double Exposure. Except for Corey, obviously, but I'll let that slide, I guess. Moving on to the next topic, we're going to discuss the consequences and their outcomes. A main outcome for Lost Records is your relationship with the girls, and that affects the past and future versions of them. You can be besties with them in the past and not really get along with them as adults, or not really be close to them as teens, but reconnect better as adults. The options really vary here in terms of how you perceive each other, and how you want your relationship to be is also very determined on the player, which I appreciate. The end scene when you're an adult and get to go back to the abyss can be affected by how your conversation goes with Autumn and Nora at the bar. If they both leave, you can go to the abyss alone. If they stay, you can all get together. My only problem with Lost Records consequences is that it's primarily just your relationship with the girls. Like, most of the choices you make only are affecting your relationships. Double Exposure also kinda suffered from this, where most of your choices impacted relationships compared to like real world consequences, if that makes sense. Like, the story really stayed the same, just people's feelings towards you could be altered. Even if you choose as your final decision to go with Safi, your end scene is still you at the bar with Moses. This one is tough to choose who the winner is because both are very similar in this realm, but I'm giving this to Lost Records. Mostly due to the fact that there are more various like outcomes you can have compared to like Double Exposure, where it's just like you're dating this person or you're just friends. At least in Lost Records, you can have like different levels of friendship, and even as adults you can still decide whether you want to be friends with them still or not. So yeah, there's just more options when it comes to Lost Records. Now I want to talk about the pacing of each game. Lost Records to me felt really slow, at least up until the end, especially in the first tape when not much was going on. And I kind of see what they were going for by giving us moments to soak in where we are and like how we're feeling. But the issue here is nothing was happening for us to really reminisce over. Looking at the original Life is Strange for a second, it was mostly chaotic what was happening, so the moment of calm we had was really enjoyable. In Lost Records, I kept wanting to skip a lot of those moments because it was dragging on. Even in Double Exposure, it was more chaotic, so the moments of calm actually felt peaceful. I didn't feel the need to take those moments in Lost Records because the tone of the game was mostly steady throughout it all. No major highs or lows, so Double Exposure wins for pacing. So we all know the small, optional, interactable items that you can interact with throughout the game. Well, Lost Records had an insane abundance of them. I was honestly so overwhelmed by it because I'm the type of player where I feel like I need to look at everything possible. Double Exposure did not have near as many when compared, but I enjoyed them more in Double Exposure, and here's why. One being I wasn't overwhelmed by the intense amount of things to look at, and two, that most of the things that we can interact with in Double Exposure, Max had commentary on. About half of the items in Lost Records that you could look at, that's it. It was just to look at without any invoice from the character, which I think is what makes those moments special. It makes you feel more as so you are the character and not just looking at random items without context. To me, Lost Records had a very unnecessary amount with no reward. The last topic we're going to be comparing is the environments. Both games have impeccable environments to explore that are so pleasing to look at, and I think both developers did such a good job in setting the atmosphere. From visual effects to music, Lost Records really makes you feel as if you are a kid in the 90s with so many nostalgic influences and tones. Double Exposure really is a modern day winter murder mystery, so we're going to look deeper to see which one is better. Clearly, Lost Records has a much more detailed and interactable environment, which is really cool. The con of that being that each area you explore is quite small. There's not much free roam when playing, and I found that to be very disappointing. And the largest area we explored, I think, was just the girls' cabin. And even that's not anything crazy, especially when compared to Double Exposure, when you can explore the entirety of the schoolyard amongst other much larger areas in the game. This factor also makes you feel more present in the world, and have more control over what you do, or how you do it even. And Swan's bedroom was extremely detailed and so satisfying to look at, but it was so small, and the amount of interactable objects did not make up for the lack of places to explore. Of course, Double Exposure didn't have many objects to interact with, but I would choose more areas to explore over some random objects with no meaning. So with all that being said, here is my winner for each category. Graphics goes to Lost Records. Story goes to Double Exposure. Characters go to Lost Records. Consequences goes to Lost Records. Pacing, Double Exposure. Interactable objects, Double Exposure. And environments, Double Exposure. Also, hi, me from the future talking right now as I'm editing this. I wanted to add a couple things to this list that I just thought of while making this. So the UI in Lost Records is also far better than in Double Exposure. In Double Exposure, it's so modern and just simple, but in Lost Records, it's so much more detailed and has so much more character to it, especially even the main title screen. It's just so much better. And even compared to the journal that Max has in Double Exposure, the artwork is good, but it's all pretty simple in my opinion. Also, not to mention the cat content is free in Lost Records and $10 in Double Exposure. And of course I bought it for Double Exposure. I'm going to buy the cat content, but still that's besides the point. And even with all that, I still had a better time playing Double Exposure than I did with Lost Records. And maybe that's slightly biased of me, but honestly, even if Max was not in Double Exposure, I think the game itself was a more chaotic and interesting experience than in Lost Records. Lost Records was just too chill for me, and that's just me personally. If you prefer Lost Records, that's completely fine. I personally just had a better time with Double Exposure. Clearly, these can all be opinion-based, so it's okay if you have different takes on who did what better. This is just my perspective and what I look for in games, and I try to make it as unbiased as possible. I did enjoy my time with both of these games, and they aren't exactly that similar, so it was kind of hard to compare. It really just goes down to personal preference for each gamer. And I think that's one of the best things about video games is getting to see everyone's perspective on how it impacted them and their experience. So what did you guys think on my comparison? Do you agree with what I said? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I want to hear your guys' opinions on who did what better and why. That's all I have for today, so I will see you guys in the next video.